Hi Steven. This is gonna be my vlog on the last wave extra credit. And before I get started with the analyzation, I just kind of want to give like a background on my experience with video analyzation and how it kind of plays in part with this film. So I took an IH class maybe about 2 years ago on film noir, and I took an English class, Film and Society, that focused more so on horror films. And just based on those two types of genres of films, it's like a trend that follows based on like the timing of it. So like in regards to the year, I feel like there's like a general trend, and one trend that I found that was apparent in the last wave was foreshadowing. There are plenty scenes in the film that I don't know why, but I just kind of felt like there was a little bit more to it, because based on cinematography, the camera kind of focused in on it a little bit more than other things. Like, for example, the scene where David is in his car and the rain is pouring down, and there's a gorilla on, it seems like a bus, and then there's a man that pops up, and then the rain. I think that it foreshadows kind of like the hallucination of it. And what else? There's other things that are kind of foreshadowing. There's like a lot of circling going back onto the film, which I really like. It kind of reminded me of The Last Swan. I said The Last Swan. The Swan book. As far as like the circling of the book towards the beginning and the end. I don't know why particularly that films back in the 1900s do a lot of foreshadowing, but it's definitely beneficial because I feel like it gives you a hint to what's going to happen. However, with this film in particular, it was like pretty precise as far as foreshadowing, like the scene where David shows up back home and he walks in with his daughter, and then it goes back to the scene from the beginning where there's like the leaking from the upstairs, and it was just a tub, but now it was something more based on like the tribal things that he had discussed with Chris. Also, one thing I noticed in the film was sound. One thing I like about films versus a book is that you can hear, obviously, and I feel like the director wanted the viewers to be able to hear exactly what was going on, and I feel like that's evident based on the amount of other music selections that are being played. Like, there's very rare that there's music playing in the background. It's mostly you can hear the sounds of every single thing, and I feel like he does that on purpose to be able to show what's important and that you should be paying close attention to every single detail, especially with the weather. When the film first began, I'm a visual learner, but it's something about sound that's a little bit more intriguing than seeing something. So listening to like the wind, I think it was the wind of the weather, and just the effects of the hail coming down, the rain coming down, and it wasn't necessarily a thunder, but it was like it was a sound, and I felt like the director wanted viewers to focus in on that sound because it led to something bigger coming towards the end. It was the reason for that was the tribal effect based on what Chris was talking about, the secrets, and something David had ended up figuring out on his own was based on the black rain and everything like that. So I felt like the director did a great job of using sound to attract viewers. I know it's kind of hard to balance sound and visuals, but I think he did a great job of using that because it gave the film a little bit more depth. It had like layers on top of layers on what you should analyze, what you should pay attention to, which made the film very complex. It took me, I know the film is only like an hour and 45 minutes, but it took me maybe about 3 hours to watch it because You really have to pay close attention to everything that's going on versus sound versus what you see, and then both of them colliding together. One thing that I did also appreciated and noticed, based on the director, is that he took great advantage of lighting. And I say that only because when it comes to a dark scene, he takes really great advantage of lighting. Like, it kind of reminded me of film noir. Film noir uses a lot of shadows, and yeah, film noir uses a lot of shadows, and it kind of reminded me of that because it created that kind of suspense in the film, and it's only apparent in the dark scenes, of course, but I felt like he used those scenes to show importance to the darkness in certain scenes. And yeah, it was a really complex film. I feel like I want to watch it again because there's a lot going on, a little bit more than just like the story, but based on cinematography, sound, as well as foreshadowing, I think that the film holds a lot more than what I'm able to spit out now. Kind of like the Swan book. The Swan book is very complex, and I feel like The Last Wave is very complex because there's a lot of circling, there's a lot of foreshadowing, and sometimes you're not able to catch on to foreshadowing because you may not be necessarily aware of the trend that's going on with films back in the 1900s, well, 1970s, and between 1930s and 1970s. So yeah, I think it was a really great film overall. I think if anything, I wish I would have watched this film before reading the Swan book, because it would have made the Swan book easier in certain senses, simply because it kind of goes into that ghosts and witch type of idea that was presented in the Swan book, which was confusing for me. But yeah, I hope that this video kind of analyzes The Last Wave in the way that it should be analyzed. Yeah, hope you have a great night, Steven, and I will see you on Monday.